Let's go.
Leave my enemies for behind. Leave my enemies for behind. Leave my enemies for behind. Oh, wings. Baba give me wings, make I fly. Baba give me wings, make I fly. Baba give me wings, make I fly. Oh, wait. I don't want go lo.
This is Wings by Millie May, one of my favorite songs from the Millie May World EP. And today we're going to do a mix breakdown of this record. And as usual, hopefully you can pick up one or two things you can use in your own record. All right. One interesting thing about this song is the fact that I mixed it last year. Was it? Can't remember. Or beginning of last year. So it'll be quite interesting to see how much my process have sort of changed. Because there's some things I definitely no longer do that I did on this record. Oof. It's a very lovely song though. That's the great thing about a great mix. A great mix is a great mix forever. So let's start with the usual process, which is, starting with session organization first. As you can see, this is something that has not changed. I'm still doing it the same way. One giant folder to contain everything. Instrumental folder, we have the Vox folder. Within the instrumental folder, we have drums, bass, melodies. Within the Vox, we have lead, we have background vocals. And as usual, the process is the same. I typically start with my gain staging to make sure my levels are great. I put out a video on gain staging about 2 weeks ago. I'm going to leave a link here. If you understand gain staging, you are 80% done with achieving a great mix. Trust me. So the first thing we have here is the kick. And I'm using the trim plugin to turn on the level by -8 dB. But we are still peaking at -7.3 dB here. This is something that I let go in the past. But nowadays, I would never allow my signal to peak at -7 dB. Even though there's still some headroom, it's still too loud. You want to stay around -18 to -15 dB. At least from my experience, that just works beautifully. Can't say this did not work for this song though, it did.
Give my reload, face my fears.
Right, but I think to be on the safer side, it's best to just keep your gain staging on that -18 to -15 range. If we look down the rest of this drums, you see that I was not very strict with my gain staging process here. We have this one peaking at -10. We have some tracks peaking at -11, and this one is not even getting up to -18. So obviously I'm able to make it work because at the end of the day, you still have to balance your instrument based on what you think will work for the record. I mean, technically I have headroom on all the drums here, but still I think it's better to have more than enough headroom. Another reason why I think this worked is probably because, as you can see, there's not a lot of instruments. It's a very simple record, and there's already enough space for every of the elements in the song to breathe. So based on that, we're good, provided none of the tracks are clipping. But again, I'm going to still remind you that it's way better to stay between -18 to -15 dB when you're doing gain staging. I think it's just the best. All right, so what else? I'm doing a low cut here up to 29 hertz, but I've since changed to doing the low shelf. I think the low shelf sounds way better. It just gives a much more tighter sound, to me at least. And then we have a sidechain bus, sidechaining the bass to the kick, or the kick to the bass, however you want to call it. Right, this is still the same. I still like to use the neutron, and I'm putting some saturation directly on the bass itself, right? Sometimes I do it like this because you have two different bass and you want different amounts of saturation on them. And sometimes I just throw it on the bass bus and it just works for everything. I mean, if you've seen any of my video, my process is typically the same. I'm using the trim plugin to do gain staging and using the EQ to carve out space for every of the instruments within the mix. Right? And then all of this is routed to the drum bus where I'm doing the drum compression. And I'm also doing a send to the parallel drum bus. When I'm doing a send to the parallel bus, I usually set the level at unity. So that way we're getting the whole signal. Alternatively, you can do the send directly from your drum bus to the parallel drum bus. Give my reload, face my fears, left them below. I know if you stop waiting, go benefits my. Right, so on the drum bus, as you can see, I'm just doing about 1 dB of gain reduction. Again, this is subgroup processing. I'm just trying to just glue the drum tracks together. It's quite simple and straightforward. And then what else? I already touched on the bass a little bit, but the process is the same. I have a trim plugin to do a bit of gain staging there. This time around, we're actually peaking at -19 dB. Again, I have since changed. Now I'm more serious with the gain staging process. Right? Before, what I just used to do was just make sure I was not clipping. But now I've understood that the more headroom you have, the easier it will be to achieve a much more cleaner and dope mix at the end of the day. Right? It just be straightforward. And then we have the catch-off EQ. And I'm actually doing the shelf here. I think shelves sound way better for kicks and bass, because you're not just cutting all the bass, right? You're letting some of that thickness through, but you're controlling the level of it, you know? Right, so that's what we're doing there. And the compressor for the sidechain compression, right? And we have the saturator like I mentioned before. I'm doing the same for the other 808 bass as well. I think the only thing that will be different is the setting for the saturator. You know, yeah, as you can see, crossover point is different for both of them. Like I said, you know, sometimes I do this if I'm trying to get different sound for different bass sounds. And then let's move on to the melodies real quick. This sound is so lovely. So as usual, gain staging, I'm using the trim plugin here, turn this down by -8 dB, and I'm using EQ to carve out space and target resonant frequencies. But this is one thing that I think I no longer do as much, right? Because here, as you can see, we have more static EQ moves. These days, I prefer to use dynamic EQ moves so that we can have a much more transparent sound. Doing static EQs is not a bad thing. You just need to make sure that you understand that when you make one adjustment, it's going to affect the entirety of the sound, while a dynamic EQ will move with the sound, which I think sounds good for most use cases. Not all the time, but I think it sounds great for most use cases. Carving out space and whatnot. And as usual, I've routed all the tracks to the melody bus. Oh, I didn't talk about the bass bus, but it's the same process. So I do have compressor there. That's where I'm doing my compression for the bass. But let's hear wait. I know one go lo. Open my polo lo. Just a mini man try, a mini man fall. I know one day for that category. So I'm doing more compression on the 808 part. Typically, this is how I like to set my bus compression. I go to the loudest part of the song, and that's where I dial in the compression. Every other thing just follows up, and the compressor becomes an amplification tool for where it's not doing actual compression, which is a win-win. Here we're hitting up to like... That's about -2 dB of gain reduction. I guess I thought I needed that, but typically I like to stay around -1. That's usually more than enough to just even out things when I'm doing bus compression. The melodies to the melody bus. Right, so just barely hitting that 1 dB of gain reduction. When I go to the rest of the tracks on the melody bus, you'll see that I'm doing the same thing. Gain stage where I need to gain stage, EQ to take out frequencies that are annoying to me. I like that one there. Oh God, ooh, I wait. I know I'm go lo. Song is really nice. That's that for the instrumental, I guess. Let's look at the vocals real quick. Vocal processing is still obviously the same. I like to do the gain staging as usual on the main track itself, and then I like to use the auto-tune directly on the main track itself. As you can see, I'm using the UAD auto-tune for this record. I actually like the sound of the UAD auto-tune. I think it sounds very natural. I did OT grinding just to find my way. I mean, you can hear the auto-tune, but it's not like in your face. It just feels like it's part of the performance. And I like to set the flex tune to 12 when I do this to try to allow more pitch deviation, as you can see there, usually for expressive purposes. And retune speed around 10 is actually a very good balance on this plugin to get a much more clean auto-tune sound that you can hear but not in your face. If you put 10 on the wave tune, for example, it just sound like a robot. I did OT grinding just to find my way. I like the way the vocals sound on this record. There's one other thing that I see here that I did. Let's look at that. So this is the delay throw. And for this record, I've done it directly on the lead vocal track. But I no longer do it this way. I think it's better if you do your delay throw sends from the vocal bus itself. That way you're sending the clean and processed vocal. Although this works, but you will get a darker delay tone. For example, let's hear what this sounds like. Speed, leave my enemies for behind. Although the dark sound you're hearing is an effect. I have a nectar pitch here and I'm doing this format, so I just did like a pitch drop there to create that pitch. Speed, leave my enemies for... Right, let me take that off. Speed, leave my enemies for... You can hear that the delay sounds dark. Again, if you're going for that tone, yeah, why not? You can just slap your delay throw directly on your main track itself. But I still prefer to do the delay throw sense from the lead vocal bus. If I want a dark tone, I can always use a plugin to darken it or put an EQ to darken it or whatever. But I think it's better to just get the process sound into your delay throws.
Speed, reminding me.
That sounds good though.
Speed, reminding me for behind. Reminding me for behind.
Now I'm thinking maybe I should have actually done auto panning on that. So you just make it go like that, you know? That would be so cool, but you know, the song is already out. So the rest of the processing is happening on the vocal box. Let's look at that real quick. At the top of the chain, we have the NS1 noise suppressor. This was when I was using the NS1 noise suppressor. You know, but this is not really doing much of this record because there's no noise here. It's set to the lowest possible setting, as you can see there. And then we have the catch of EQ to target resonant frequencies. On this song, as you can see, I'm not exactly targeting a lot of resonant frequencies. I think at this point, I've not gone crazy with trying to be very, very clean. Now I'm doing more cleaning up. And also I'm using the dynamic EQ function and not the static EQ function. I think that works for when you are targeting a lot more resonant frequencies because you have dynamic EQ moves. So when there's no resonant frequency, nothing is happening. So you get a much more clean and transparent sound that doesn't feel robotic. Because if I do the amount of cleaning that I do with the static EQ, you will just have a weird sound. I don't know how to put it, but it will not sound very, very open and transparent like it does with the dynamic EQ. That's what I'm trying to say. And then we have the Nectar DS to target some sibilants. You can see that there very quick. And then we have the SSL E-channel strip, still my favorite for shaping tone of vocals. And we are doing a cut up to, you can say minus 14 dB on the low frequencies around 200 hertz. For the low mid, we're doing a cut up to, again, minus 14 around, say 750 hertz. And I'm using a tight Q here. Nowadays, I like to use wide Q. I think a wide Q just sort of brings the vocal into the mix a little bit more. And that seems to be the sound nowadays. And then for the high mid, we're doing a cut up to say minus 2 dB around 3 kilohertz. And this is a wider Q. And then for the high frequencies, we're doing a boost up to say maybe 1 or 2 dB there, around 16 hertz for that shine. And then this leads us to the first compressor because I like to compress in series. So I'm basically just using these two tame picks. So you can see that when that's when the compressor kicks in. And again, this is also serving like input for the LA2A. Because when I set my input to get the amount of compression I want, I also have to set my output to get the amount of output that will go into the LA2A. And that's what I'm using to do the main compression to even out the performance some more. As you can see, we are hitting around minus 3 dB at the very, very loudest parts of the performance. And obviously before the LA2A, we have the C6, which is awesome. Like I said many times, this plugin makes a huge difference to how the vocals sound. Let's bypass it. I mean, you would think that sounds good because it does kind of sounds good, but with the C6, immediately you have that control. The vocals just sits properly in the mix. It's just beautiful. So this and the SSL in concert, yeah, it's a great way to achieve a great sound of vocal. And the SPL DSR, this is what I use to control the final warmth of the vocal. So if I want it to be hot, I reduce it. If I want it to be warm, I increase the S reduction, which I really like the vocal on this song. It sounds very, very good. So that's it. Let's go to the time-based effect. We have our room reverb send going to the pure plate. Very, very little reverb there to just latch with the vocals. And then we have the main reverb send going to the H reverb. I also think this is the best reverb for vocals. Again, also my opinion. But it sounds good. It just feels very natural. It just has a very nice, natural sounding reverb, to me at least, right? And then we have our delay send going to the comeback kit, my favorite delay plugin for now. Or maybe I'm just stuck in my ways and not willing to try other delay plugins. Yeah, I can change the light, and that's something different. Well, I like this plugin a lot, you know, especially because of this docking feature here. So I don't have to do sidechain compression, right? I could just turn this up, and whenever the vocal is playing, the delay would dock down, and when the vocal stops, the delay comes up, you know. Very, very cool, very easy. Just makes your process just a little bit faster. I think that's all for the lead vocals, to be fair. And then we'll go to the background vocals.
Wait, I know I'm good. I know one day for that category. No fit to tap in story. I like a man I fit afford. On God. Yeah, I know if even can't deep pay sweat tears. Give my real love, face my fears, left them below. I know if you stop waiting, go benefit my guy. I say if I guide, I go link my guy. And I don't learn my lesson. Lesson learned is on to the next thing. Now I know put my out with.
This is a very, very, very lovely record. The background vocals is straightforward as usual. I like to do my gain staging first, put the auto-tune plugin directly on the track itself, and then the rest of the processing is happening on the background vocal bus. But before I get to the background vocal bus, I like to go to this my background summing bus where I'm doing multi-band compression to keep the frequencies from 3K to 6K below the lead so that anytime they play together.
For that category, no fit to tap in story. I like a man I fit afford. On God.
Right, so you just make sure the background vocals will always be below the lead vocals. You know, it's a very, very nice, neat technique. But it looks like I'm doing some other things here for these two tracks. Okay, so I'm doing some EQing directly on the tracks to create that radio effect, I think. Because this looks like a radio effect, EQ curve. Yeah, pretty much.
A category, no fit to go lo 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 lo. Open my polo lo 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 lo. Just a many men try and many men fall. I know one day for that category.
So as you can see, most times if I feel like I need to do some other like EQ shaping on specific tracks, then I'll do it directly on the track itself. So we're using the waves tune for the auto tune on the background vocals. Like I mentioned before, if you set your note transition speed and all of that to 10 on the waves tune, you get way more auto tune sound. That's why I'm doing 15 here. For me, 15 is a sweet spot for the waves tune plugin. It's actually quite nice. So let's look at the background vocal bus. The same process. The plugins are the same as you can see, just the EQing and stuff that's usually different. Actually, not so much difference for this particular song, to be honest, as you can see. The C6 will be different though. Yeah, C6 is different setting for the C6. The most important thing is to craft a very great sounding background vocals that is also existing in a different space from the lead vocals. That way they can blend perfectly. This multi-band compression setting here actually does a great job of separating the lead from the background vocal. Then another thing that typically sets the background vocals and the lead vocals apart, for me anyways, is a time-based effect. The room reverb is the same, but I do have a very big reverb bus which is going to the Valhalla vintage reverb. More reverb typically means the background vocals will go to the background, essentially. And I like to use a different delay as well. I like to use the Nectar delay for my background vocals. Then I set the timing a bit different, so I have like 8 notes on the left, quarter note on the right to get that ping pong effect.
One day for that category, no fit to tap in story. I like a man I fit afford. On God, deep pay sweat tears, give my real love.
And then I have one more send here going to my chorus effects bus, which has the doubler. And the purpose of that is to send more information to the side, just to make the background vocals feel a little bit wider, essentially. Yeah, man, that's pretty much everything I've done for the mix for this record. Again, very straightforward record, very simple, very easy. All right, so let's do a quick walkthrough of the mastering chain. My process is the same. I do have a view meter at the top here to monitor my levels. Right, as you can see for this song, I'm actually kissing the red a little bit, but it's safer not to exceed 0, all right? And typically from there, we proceed down the rest of the processing. I have the zone. Like I've always said, this one is just like the final stage of sort of like checking for resonant frequencies in the entire mix. Right, like the last cleanup process. Sometimes I do engage gain match here so that I can ensure that I am not making any changes to the level of the song at this stage. And I think it's, you know, it's good practice to do that actually. And then we have another equalizer here. This time around, I'm just doing my usual 1 dB boost around 60 Hz. And the imager, okay, this is my favorite imager because, you know, you have this crossover point, like I've said many times. This allows you to actually set different stereo width for different frequency ranges. As you can see, I have more stereo widening happening on the higher frequencies, that's 8K and up. Very little from 1.8K to 8K. I don't touch the mids. This is what I like to consider my mids for my mastering, from 100 to 1.8K. And then I like to narrow everything below 100 to get a bit of a mono sound. It tightens up the low end a bit. And then we have the SPL PQ EQ for the final tone shaping for the entire record. Right, so just 2 dB boost around 61 Hz. The low mid, I'm doing a cut. That's a 1 dB cut around 205 Hz. Now, when I'm doing mastering, I'm making sure my EQ changes are very, very minute. Because what I'm doing here is more or less like polish, like fine tuning, right? If I have to do anything that is drastic, say for example, if I have to push the highs or the mid or something up to say 5 dB, then I would go back into the mix and make the adjustment within the mix rather than on the mastering side of things. I think mastering is about making tiny adjustments that actually leads to a very big result. But that doesn't mean you cannot push in your mastering stage. It's just the way I like to do it. I'm not doing nothing to the mids. For the high mids, we're doing a boost around what's this? That's the process scale. Yeah, just like 1 dB boost to just get extra snap into that snare. And that's it. This is set to stereo, so whatever I do to the left will affect the right. You can also do mid-side processing with this EQ, by the way, but I like to just do stereo. And then we have the SPL ion compressor for that final glue. Hey. So 1 dB of gain reduction, that's always my target. Fast release and slowest attack. That's what you need for mastering. And then I have the high pass sidechain filter set to 91 Hz. That means everything from 91 Hz and up is what would trigger the compressor essentially. And then I'm not doing nothing with the mono maker here. I think this is something that I now use a lot. This mono maker. In recent times, I would set this to maybe like 80. So that way, everything below 80 Hz is mono. It helps you get a tighter low end still. That's all I'm doing with this plugin. And then we have the black box saturator plugin for that saturation across the entire song. So the way I like to use this is very simple. I like to set my saturation at 50%, pentode at 50%, going to the triode also at 50%, a little bit of air. But at the end of the day, I do parallel processing with this. So if you look at the mix, you can see that I've set this to 50% as well. So we have 50% of the signal going through the black box without getting affected, and we have another 50% that's affected, and all of that combined goes down the rest of the chain essentially, and that goes into the BX clipper. We'll just do some clipping here before we get to the limiter. I like to set the ceiling at -2 dB and the knee as needed. I just use my ears to gauge how loud the song is getting without affecting the quality of the sound. And this is something I've changed in recent times, right? I prefer to use the diode. I think the diode sounds a bit warmer. Like, let's listen to that. This is diode, right?
Just a many men trying, a many men fall. I know one day for that category.
The sound of the FET is a bit sharper. It's a bit harsher than the diode. The diode sounds really warm, but I like the way this song sounds, to be honest. And then that leads us into the limiter. This is my favorite limiter till now. I've not changed my limiter. I have my ceiling set to 0.5 dB. Which, you know, sets maximum output level. This also translates to your true peak level once you have the true peak limiting on. Now, this song, I did not enable true peak limiting, as you can see, but this is something I do a lot nowadays because the true peak limiter on this particular limiter doesn't exactly affect the quality of the sound. You know, it's transparent. Just a many men trying, a many men fall. I know one day for that category. No fit to the picking story. I like a man, I fit afford. That's really nice. I really like the way it sounds. Transient FOCs, I've set this at 60%. This transient FOCs is my favorite feature of this plugin because you can easily use this to add more snap to the entire song, which is just so cool. Right?
Just a many men trying, a many men fall.
You can hear that as I increase it, even the snare becomes even harder, right? So it depends on what you want for the song, actually. And all of this is giving us, let's see.
Trying, a many men fall. I know one day for that category.
So that's technically -9 LUFS and -0.6 dB true peak, which is great. So that's it, man. That's everything we've done for this record. I'm going to leave a link below to the record so you guys can listen to it. It's a very nice song, as you can hear.
This sweat, yes, gave my reload, face my fears, left them below. I know if you stop waiting, go benefit my guy. I say, if I guide, I go think my guy. And I don't learn my lesson. Lesson learned is on to the next. Now I know put my out with no concern. Oh, God, I did my own city.
It's a very dope song. So yeah, man, that's it for now. I hope you got something from this as usual. And if you did, make sure you leave me a like and subscribe to the channel if you've not subscribed, okay? And if you'd like to buy my vocal presets and my custom mixing and mastering template, I'm going to leave a link below as well where you can get them, okay? And if you want to book my services on mixing and mastering, I'm going to leave a link below to the engineers page so you can book my services or hit me up on Instagram at Benny Macaulay DB. So that's going to be for now. I should see you on the next one. Benny Macaulay out.
Wait. Wait, I don't want go lo 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 lo. Open my ball lo 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 lo. There's many men try and many men fall. I know one day for that category. No fit with the begin story. I like a man I fit afford. On God, ooh, I do pray for.